Hello, I'm Chris Janishevsky and welcome to the Rebellious Times podcast. Today's episode is From HR to AI, how a non-technical founder is disrupting HR compliance. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Jocelyn King, CEO of Virgil HR. Virgil HR is a SaaS solution that empowers HR professionals to make smart, compliant employment decisions in real time. Hey, Jocelyn, how are you doing?
Hi, Chris. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. I know you've got a really interesting story, and I'd love for our viewers to hear about it. And uh, the Rebellious Times podcast, we love to talk about the journey of tech founders and help people understand the AI era from both a workforce, a work-life balance perspective, and building products in these crazy times. And so I'd love to start by just learning a little bit about you. Tell me a bit about your journey, 15 years of experience in HR, and then how you ended up building a startup.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot in there. I'll try and make it as compact as possible. I started my career in HR straight out of college. I was a philosophy major and had no clue what I wanted to do, obviously. So I got recruited out of school by Target, and they offered me a job in human resources. And I thought that'd be pretty interesting. I feel like I'd learn a lot about business by being in HR. So I decided to do that, not knowing the journey it would take me on today. And I love it. I love working with people. I love helping people develop and grow in their role in their life. You think about the fact that a lot of people are at work more than they are at home. So how can you make it as great of an experience for them as possible? So I started off in retail, but after that, moved over into technology and never left. I worked for an ed tech company. I worked for a Salesforce professional services company, moved into cybersecurity, um, automation and robotics, and education technology again at the end of the day before starting my company. And I was at a very large automation robotics company. I was their VP of HR at the time. And we were hiring in a lot of states, a lot of provinces in Canada. So I oversaw North America for them. And it was so hard tracking and complying with employment and labor laws, particularly at the state and local level. And we were using Google, which was really time consuming, talking to lawyers, which would just break the bank, and we'd lose our budget pretty quickly. There wasn't really a good solution out there. And as an HR professional, you're kind of treated as if you're a lawyer, except you have no experience as a lawyer. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling because there's a lot on your shoulders when you're making these decisions, many times autonomously. So I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this. There's got to be a way where we can get information into HR's hands real time, but also leverage automation technology to help analyze what laws are relevant to what they're working on without them having to go do all of that research. So I thought I'd love to start a company. I have no clue how to start a company and decided to move over to an ed tech startup. And they were a Series C startup. They'd been around for maybe 5 or 6 years. They were well funded and they were actually going through a fundraising round. And that was very attractive to me because I wanted to learn more about fundraising. I knew nothing about it at the time. And so I moved over to them. And after a few months, they told the two founders that I had this idea. And they were so supportive, they insisted I quit. And they were two of my very first investors, which was pretty cool. So that was the beginning of my journey that started 3.5 years ago.
Wow, that's super interesting. And so, from where did you start with building a product? Obviously, you had this deep experience, you had a deep understanding of the challenges in the space, which is the first thing when building a product. But what about to actually get an MVP built and get something out there?
Yeah, so I'm a non-technical founder, obviously, and building a technology company when you're a non-technical founder is just a bit more challenging. What's nice is that yes, you have all of this knowledge about what challenges the user is experiencing and what solution they'd like to see out of this, and that's really helpful. So I had a good idea of how I wanted the technology to work and what I wanted it to look like. I just needed somebody to build it. So at a previous company, I had worked with an outsourcing engineering team out of Vietnam. And a business partner of mine reached out to them to see if they'd be interested in working with us, and they were. And so, it was almost like I was a business analyst and a product manager in a way, where I would tell them kind of, here are the requirements, and this is how I want it to be done, et cetera, et cetera. And they built it out, and they did a beautiful job. I mean, the UI UX of the product is incredible. It's something that almost every person who sees it comments on. So it was phenomenal, and to see it have built up over time from the beginning, the MVP, to what it is today is pretty cool.
That's fantastic. And how long are you still using the same company? And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you've had a really good experience there. I've heard all sorts of differing stories about experiences of working with offshore teams, but it sounds like you've landed on a good team and you've given them good guidance.
Yeah, they're fantastic. We still use them. We've been using them now this entire time. Their name is Bigin, it's Bigin. So if anybody listening is interested in getting in touch with them, please contact me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to make that introduction.
Oh, that's super cool. I'm sure they'll appreciate the mention as well. And so um, let's kind of switch gears here to the evolution of HR technology. Um, from a from an employee perspective, um, with the introduction of AI and the ability for companies to monitor everything down to micro level, there's the potential for employees to feel a little concerned that it almost becomes a surveillance operation, and you know it it adds a little extra pressure to their day-to-day life to think that every little thing they'll do is being monitored and assessed by potentially some AI and then reported back, and there are consequences. How do we manage? How do we build a trust-focused solution um, and manage this perspective here as we kind of move into this new era?
Yeah, that is really tough. As an HR professional, I would not advocate for a tool like that. I know those types of tools will kind of state as part of their value proposition that they're there to see if somebody is being too productive and efficient and needs some time off because they're going to burn out. But realistically, that's not how most managers are using this tool. And so I think that's a little disingenuous. When you and I were speaking earlier, you reminded me that what was it that I'd called this tool? I can't even remember anymore.
You called it a snitch tool.
A snitch tool, yes. I'm not a big fan. I've worked with companies that use tools like this. I think it shows to me a level of distrust in your employees when you have a tool like it. And it's just this feeling of big brother, like I've got someone over my shoulder, and it's making me feel very self-conscious, right? I mean, ultimately, as an employer, you don't want your employees doing the wrong thing on company-owned equipment, of course. And there are ways to track for things like that, but those tools that are monitoring productivity, sometimes people are really productive on their phones,
Yeah.
and that's not being monitored. So it's just tough. And so if you do have a tool like that in your organization, training your managers, coaching them to really understand how that tool should be used to support your employees rather than, in many cases, unfortunately, discipline your employees is really critical.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it's a fine balance, right, to maintaining morale and maintaining productivity.
Yeah.
There's got to be an element of trust there. Then you've got to give your team the tools and the space to perform at their best. Tell me about your customers. Who would typically use virtual HR? What's a good use case?
Oh my gosh, we have a wide range of customers. We have small companies with maybe 50 employees, all the way to small enterprise. I'd say our sweet spot generally tends to sit between, and I know this is a big range, but between 500 to 5,000. We have more, we have less. Every industry besides federal government. And you know, big teams, big HR teams, small HR teams. Sometimes they'll even have line managers using our tool as well if they have kind of a more of like a self-service culture. So we generally tend to see that a lot too. But yeah, I mean, a perfect example, we have company customer of ours. They have about 6,000 employees. They're a PE-backed company. They focus on mental health in particular. We do have a lot in the healthcare industry, actually. And they've done some really well, they provided some really great feedback to us in terms of the amount of time that their team has saved by using our tool, but the amount of money that they've saved in legal fees in particular, or fines that they have avoided as a result of the risk mitigation, has been pretty incredible.
Fantastic. And I bet that, sometimes I speak to eight or companies where they literally only have one person working in HR
Mm.
because I work with a lot of startups. And that's a big responsibility for them, like you say, to understand all of the nuances of the the legalities of how to behave in certain situations. So it must give them a lot of comfort to be able to turn to your tool and know that they're getting good advice.
Yeah, and even in many in many cases, actually using the tool to go to a manager and be like, "Look, like you have to do this. This tool is telling you that that's the law." Yeah, it's really great collateral for them. I love being able to support HR department of ones because I mean, I've been in that role before, and it is really hard. You are under supported. You're almost always seen as just a cost center. um, you are often reporting into finance, which I think is a huge conflict of interest. So it's a really challenging job. If you have a tool that can help give you a sense of confidence in decisions that you're making and a level of comfort in them as well, then that's a great win. And we make it very affordable, particularly to HR departments of one, because again, I was in that role and I know how tough it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were in the Techstars Accelerator. I'd love to hear about that. What's it like being in an accelerator and how did it help you get your product to market?
Yeah, so it's funny actually. We missed the deadline for the Techstars Workforce Development Accelerator program, which is their HR tech program. But we had an investor, SHRM. It's a society for HR management, and they're pretty large in the HR space. And they have a venture arm called SHRM Labs. They're pretty well connected. They reached out to the managing director of that program, said, "Hey, you really should check out this company." We were actually the youngest company that SHRM invested in, and one of only two that actually has an HR practitioner as a founder. There aren't very many of us out there, honestly. But we joined the program, which was really exciting because it's quite competitive to get in, and it was a great experience. When I joined, I thought for sure what we need to focus on is go to market. We've built our product. We're ready for, our go to market plans. And so that's what I really want to focus on while we are part of the accelerator. And they took a look at the product and said, "Nope, you need to work more on your UI UX." At the time. So this was maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. You need to work more on your UI UX. Like there's a ton of work on the product side that needs to be done. At the time, we didn't have a product manager. It was just me and one of our attorneys that was kind of functioning as product managers. And so we worked with some of their specialists, and they provided a ton of feedback to us, gave us a lot of guidance, and we ended up launching our product publicly a month after we finished Techstars, and kind of never looked back from there. They gave, and like I said earlier, we get so many accolades on our UI UX, and so much of that is in part to the tech team that's built this out, but also to the Techstars team as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And how does the accelerator look in terms of are you on site? How many hours a week? Who do you have assigned to support you?
Yeah, this was, I mean, every accelerator is different. Some require you to be there every day, others it's 100% remote. In our case, it was based out of Denver. So we were in Denver the first week and the last week. And then the rest of the time it was remote. And we were probably dedicating 15 to 20 hours a week on work with the accelerator, meetings and stuff like that. There were a couple weeks, like there are these 2 weeks called Mentor Madness, where they introduce you to tons and tons and tons of potential mentors. And it's almost like a speed dating exercise. Like literally, your entire day is just back to back with 15 to 30-minute meetings with these amazing, amazing people. And then you kind of choose the scorecard of these are my top 10, and they choose to have their scorecard of who their favorites were, and they get connected and then work with you through the rest of the program. There's some I still work with today, years later. They're phenomenal. So those weeks are pretty crazy. You really have to kind of block off your calendar from anything else, because there's a high expectation there that you find the right mentor and be prepared to fully vet them.
Well, what a wonderful experience to set you up for success. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Um, so obviously you're a female founder, and I know that you know, or I would like to hear your story around any challenges you face there, and if it is something, if there are any tips for other female founders, or for even for accelerators or anybody else you work with to help more women in tech build successful businesses.
Yeah. So it is really challenging raising money as a female founder. I wish I could not say that. I wish I could say the opposite, but that is true. It is hard. I've had some, really derogatory comments made that have been upsetting, and all because I was a woman, and it was a really tough thing to go through. But there were so many amazing advocates. And so what I'd say is, look for those people. Look for the people who are advocating for women in technology. There are a lot of venture capital firms, especially in the early stages, that will only cater to female founders, or will cater to minority founders, of which they kind of put female into that category. So a lot there. And you'd be so surprised, you reach out to other leaders, other women entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, and just ask for a little bit of their time to get some mentorship, and they're so happy to do it. So you can really build a community pretty quickly if you're proactive about that and you find the right people. But I actually didn't get any funding from the VCs that invest in women or minorities. I got funding from, as I mentioned, SHRM. I did get funding from a Maryland state venture arm that was specifically focused on minorities. So that we did get some money from. But one of my favorites is a VC called Squadra Ventures. They're based now out of DC. They focus predominantly on cyber and national defense tech, but their first cohort of companies was kind of a bit of a mix. Really, the theme behind it all was whether they were military. Founders were military affiliated. I'm a military spouse, so I qualified, and I was the last company in that cohort that they had invested in before raising a new round. And the principal of Squadra Ventures, his name is Guy Filippelli, is an amazing person, and he was so supportive. And I feel like in an industry like cyber and national defense, unfortunately, you don't always find that. He is incredible, and so finding a VC like that can be really supportive of the work that you're doing and just see you for the entrepreneur that you are rather than your gender is an incredible feeling. And I'm so grateful for supporters like him.
Well, kudos to you for cutting through the BS and being proactive and tenacious and going out finding the people that you needed to support and build a successful startup. That's just a great effort. So switching gears a little here, what do you think is the future for HR technology, and how can companies sort of better balance this whole compliance side of the business with the trust side?
Yeah, so that's a big question. The future of HR tech, I think, is going to be very focused around automation and AI, of course. I think we'll see a lot of efficiencies come out of it. And that's certainly something we've been working on since the very beginning. So now that AI is kind of caught up to that point, that's something that's really exciting. Um, what will be really interesting to watch, though, is you know as more AI is introduced into the workforce, what happens to the people it's displacing? And what is HR doing to prepare for that? So, are they building new skills for their employees? Are they coming up with new career ladders? What are they doing from a learning and development perspective to help prepare their workforce for these changes? That to me is still an unknown. I'd really like to see what happens with that. And I think some cool tech could come out of that as well. The other thing people talk a lot about is this idea of a CHRAIO.
Okay.
Yeah. So a CHRO with AI. So a lot of people are talking about this idea that AI would actually be incorporated into your workforce and would fall under human resources. I don't think that should happen because I don't think that enough HR practitioners are knowledgeable enough in technology to understand how to fully manage the scope of something like that. I think that should probably fall under, a CISO, for example. But that is something that's talked about a lot. And I do think, nonetheless, it's an interesting concept and one that should be considered. So we'll see what comes of that and how that impacts HR tech as well.
Yeah.
From a compliance perspective, though, my hope is that we're able to spearhead really a lot of these really innovative changes that are occurring in the compliance tech side, particularly for human resources. And that's being done by the automation and AI that we're leveraging today as part of our product. And we're continuing to innovate on. We have a really exciting product roadmap for that as well. The idea being that, it can almost function as your compliance specialist within your organization. And I hate the idea of like replacing somebody, but I think that there are really great opportunities for that person to move into a role that's more strategic. So AI can handle more of the, autonomous, repeatable tasks that nobody really wants to do. So there's a lot, and I don't want to share more because we have a ton on our roadmap we're working on, and more will come out in the near future on the work that we're doing. But I do definitely see an opportunity for HR practitioners to start automating a lot of this really repetitive work on the compliance side that is super, super time consuming. You survey an HR practitioner, they are on average spending 8 hours a week on compliance tasks. A full day of the work week is spent on compliance tasks. That's crazy. If we could cut that down to 1 hour or 2 hours, how impactful would that be to their job? That's ultimately my goal at the end of the day is I want to empower human resources professionals to be more strategic, to showcase that they can be a strategic function in a business, that they're not this administrative hire and fire shop that's just kind of a cost center. My goal is I want a CHRO to replace the CFO as the right hand man or woman. That's what I'd like to see one day. So we'll see. Maybe we can make our own little contribution.
Well, with empowerment through AI, anything's possible, right? Potentially, HR could be the right-hand person there. And let's hope that HR can contribute to helping people feel confident about their jobs and leveraging AI to make people more productive and better at the work they do, as opposed to fearing potential consequences for being replaced, which we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thanks so much, Jocelyn. I've loved having you on. I look forward to checking in with you again and seeing how what emerges from this product roadmap you're building. And I wish you all the best for 2025.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.